The morning sun filtered weakly through the heavy curtains of the Reynolds family home. Margaret, a petite elderly woman with silver hair neatly pinned back, sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. She had made the kitchen spotless before breakfast, as she always did, pouring care into the house she had helped build, into the family she had nurtured. She watched David, her son, pacing back and forth in the living room. His face was tense, jaw clenched, hands tapping nervously against the table. He had always been like this, prone to impatience when things didn't go exactly his way, but today there was something darker lurking behind that frustration, something that made Margaret's heart tighten in a way she hadn't felt in decades. "Mom," David said sharply, finally stopping in front of her. "We need to talk." Margaret looked up, her soft eyes steady. "Of course, David. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "It's about the house. You've been staying here for too long. Emily and we think it's time for you to move out." Margaret's tea trembled slightly in her hands. She swallowed hard, feeling a sudden surge of shock and disbelief. "Move out?" she echoed, her voice calm but her mind racing. "David, this is the house I helped you buy, the house we worked for together. Are you serious?" "Yes, Mom," he said firmly, his voice cold. "It's time. Emily and we need our space. You're in the way. I can't keep pretending everything is fine." The words landed like a blow. Margaret felt her chest tighten, a pain of hurt sharper than she expected. She thought of the nights she had stayed awake worrying about his school grades. She remembered the paychecks she had quietly saved to help him buy this very house, the countless sacrifices she had made so he could have a better life than she did. And now she was being discarded like an old piece of furniture. She inhaled slowly, trying to steady her voice. "David, I gave everything for this family. I raised you, supported you, sacrificed my comfort for you. And now you want me to leave?" David flinched, but he didn't waver. "I'm sorry, Mom. I can't do this anymore. You need to find somewhere else to stay." Margaret's heart sank. She anticipated disagreements, maybe frustration, even disappointment. But this cold dismissal felt like betrayal. And yet a small voice inside her stirred, a voice that David could never know, something he had never realized. Margaret was not powerless. She nodded slowly. "Very well," she said, her tone calm, almost serene. "I will leave." David blinked as if surprised by her lack of protest. Emily entered the room just then, her lips pressed in a thin line. "See, David," she said, "she understands. It's better for everyone this way." Margaret smiled faintly. "Better for whom?" she asked softly, though she directed the question to no one in particular. That night, Margaret packed only what she truly needed: her favorite scarf, a few dresses, her documents, and a small amount of cash for emergencies. She didn't take furniture, china, or heirlooms. She didn't need to. She didn't even shed a tear. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. As she stepped out into the crisp night air, Margaret looked back at the house one last time. Every window reflected memories: David's first steps, birthday parties, tears she had wiped, and smiles she had nurtured. And now it would no longer be her home. But that was okay. She had a plan. Because Margaret had a secret. Margaret's fortune had quietly accumulated for decades. While David and Emily assumed she lived modestly, relying on her pension, she had spent years investing in stocks, real estate, and small businesses that had grown exponentially. She had never flaunted it, never allowed it to interfere with her family life, and certainly never used it to gain leverage over her son. Now, in the stillness of her modest new apartment, Margaret smiled. She wasn't poor, she wasn't dependent, and she certainly wasn't powerless. For the first time in decades, she was free to live life entirely on her own terms. The first few days were quiet. Margaret wandered through the city streets, noting little cafes she had always ignored, boutiques she had never entered, and parks she had never explored. She bought herself some small luxuries she long denied herself, and for the first time in her life, she felt. Margaret woke early in her new apartment, sunlight spilling over the polished wooden floors and soft cream walls. The view from her balcony overlooked the city skyline, a panorama she had only ever dreamed of seeing up close. For decades, she had put her family first, sacrificing her own comfort for theirs. But now she had a life entirely her own. She sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the warmth and aroma. A faint smile played on her lips as she reflected on how far she had come. David and Emily had thought her weak, dependent, and financially powerless. They didn't know that every penny they assumed she lacked had been quietly growing, compounding silently, waiting for the day she could finally claim the life she deserved. Margaret's first week in her new life was simple but deliberate. She explored the city on foot, visiting little cafes tucked into quiet corners, wandering into boutique shops she had only ever passed by, and sitting in parks, watching children play and couples walk hand in hand. It was freedom she had never truly known, a freedom of choice, of time, of space. By the second week, she had enrolled in a gourmet cooking class at a prestigious culinary school. She had always loved cooking, but never for herself, always for others. Now she chopped, sautéed, and seasoned with abandon, tasting sauces and creating dishes that were purely for pleasure. Her laughter filled the kitchen, catching the attention of her classmates, who marveled at her skill and poise. At night, Margaret would sit by her balcony, painting in her sketchbook or reading novels she had set aside for years. The city lights twinkled like a million tiny promises below her. For the first time in decades, she slept easily, without the weight of family demands pressing on her chest. Flashback: the years of sacrifice. As she prepared a light breakfast one morning, her mind drifted back to memories she had long buried. She remembered the nights she had stayed awake stitching clothes for David's school events, the nights she had skipped her own meals to make sure he had snacks, and the countless paychecks she had silently set aside so he could attend a private university. She remembered lending him money for his first car, for his first apartment, and later for the down payment on the house he now occupied. Not once had she expected repayment. Her joy had come from seeing him thrive, from watching him grow. And yet, despite all she had done, they had treated her like a burden. The bitterness of those memories lingered for a moment, but Margaret let them go. She had chosen a new path. Her past sacrifices had paved the way for the freedom she now enjoyed, and she would not let resentment tarnish her hard-earned peace. Luxury and discovery. Within a month, Margaret began expanding her life in ways she had only dreamed of. She purchased a small penthouse in a high-rise overlooking the water, its large windows framing breathtaking sunsets. The interior was elegant but comfortable. She had chosen every piece of furniture herself, with a delicate balance of style and warmth. Margaret also began investing in herself. She joined an art club, attending private viewings and mingling with collectors. She enrolled in yoga and Pilates classes, relishing the sensation of strength and vitality returning to her body. And she traveled, first to nearby cities, then overseas, staying in luxurious villas and exploring cultures she had only read about. At a charity gala in Paris, she mingled effortlessly among philanthropists and entrepreneurs. People complimented her elegance, her wisdom, and her insight into investment strategies. Margaret listened with a quiet satisfaction. David would never imagine her here, living a life he assumed she couldn't. David's growing guilt. Back home, David's life began unraveling. Small business ventures he had undertaken without his mother's guidance failed one after another. Emily grew frustrated with their diminishing lifestyle, the mounting bills, and the quiet tension that had settled over their home. David replayed the memory of the day he had kicked Margaret out countless times in his mind. He remembered her calm acceptance, the dignified way she had left without anger, without confrontation. He had assumed she was weak. He had assumed she needed him. And now he realized how catastrophically wrong he had been. One evening, sitting alone in the dimly lit Margaret had grown comfortable in her new life. The apartment overlooking the city was no longer just a place to live, it was a sanctuary. Every morning she would step out onto the balcony, feeling the breeze on her face, watching the sunrise paint the skyline in gold and pink. For decades, her life had revolved around others, her son, her family, her sacrifices. Now it revolved around her. Her mornings were leisurely, a cup of espresso, a light breakfast, and time to reflect. Her afternoons were full of activities she had once only dreamed about: painting classes, yoga, travel planning, and volunteering for her foundation. The work she did for elderly women who had been treated like she once had became her passion. Each woman she helped was a reminder of why independence mattered, why self-respect was priceless. David's desperation reaches its peak. Back home, David could no longer ignore the reality of his choices. Business ventures failed, investments went sour, and the quiet emptiness of the house gnawed at him constantly. He couldn't shake the image of his mother living the life he had denied her, a life of freedom, comfort, and power. One evening, alone in his study, David scrolled through social media and saw yet another article. Margaret had attended a private art gala in London. She was radiant, confident, surrounded by influential people, smiling freely, a world he had assumed impossible for her. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling, I need you. Please forgive me." But Margaret did not reply. Not yet. She had no interest in rescuing a relationship built on entitlement and disregard. She had chosen freedom, and she would not compromise it for apologies that came too late. A glimpse of the life she could have had. Margaret reflected often on the past, not with regret but with clarity. She remembered raising David, the sleepless nights, the money quietly invested, the years spent putting others first. She remembered the day he kicked her out and how her heart had clenched, but how, paradoxically, that moment had also unlocked a door she never thought she would see. Her life now was the life she had always deserved. She traveled to the Maldives, staying in private villas overlooking turquoise waters. She walked through the vineyards of France, tasting wines she had once only read about. She attended charity galas and exclusive art exhibitions, moving through the world with elegance, confidence, and absolute control over her own destiny. Each experience was a quiet triumph, a confirmation of her worth, a proof of her independence. David's anger, guilt, and ignorance no longer had the power to affect her. The confrontation that never needed words. Months after she left, David finally had the courage to meet her in person. He tracked her down at one of her foundation's events. He saw her from across the room, smiling, confident, surrounded by people who respected her, admired her, and celebrated her achievements. He approached her hesitantly. "Mom, I've been a fool," he admitted. "I didn't understand. I treated you like you were nothing. I'm so sorry." Margaret turned, studied him calmly, and for a moment he thought he would see forgiveness in her eyes, but he didn't. "David," she said, her voice steady, powerful yet gentle, "there is nothing to forgive. You made your choices, I made mine. I live my life on my terms, and it is a life I will never compromise for anyone who cannot see my worth. Learn from this and never forget that respect is earned, not demanded." David's shoulders sagged, a mixture of shame, regret, and awe washing over him. He realized, finally, that his mother's power was never in money. It had been in knowledge, foresight, courage, and self-respect. She had walked away from toxicity and in doing so had claimed the life she had always deserved. Margaret's ultimate triumphs. Margaret returned to her evening balcony ritual, sipping champagne, watching the city lights flicker like tiny stars. She had traveled, created, helped others, and experienced freedom on every level. She had not only survived the betrayal, she had thrived because of it. Her foundation continued to grow, helping women like her, strong, independent, self-sufficient,